This woman is a witch who is both kind and cruel. For those who illegally enter Oz, she will punish them with the most cruel punishments. As soon as East asked the woman about her purpose of coming here, the gun in her pocket attracted East's attention. Although East had witnessed many things, she had never seen this kind of weapon. East asked the woman what it was, but she only replied that it was very dangerous and that it could lead to human death. East was a bit contemptuous because she was a supreme witch, so this small black lump could not kill her. In this world, only witches could kill witches. Then, East continued to ask the woman how to use this thing. At that time, Dorothy took advantage of the situation to make East point the gun at her. Unexpectedly, Dorothy's words deceived East. Then East pulled the trigger, and the bullet hit her right in the middle of the forehead, killing her instantly. At this time in the distant Emerald City, the witch West felt her sister being killed and screamed in pain. Looking at East's body, Dorothy was also a bit confused because this was not her original intention. Dorothy had also just come to this strange world not long ago. A day ago, Dorothy was swept into the air by a giant tornado. After a while of spinning, Dorothy arrived in this world. At the moment of landing, Dorothy accidentally bumped into a woman in red. Dorothy went to check and found that the woman was dead. So Dorothy took this woman's clothes and gun from the car, brought her dog and prepared to find her way home. But soon after, Dorothy met a native child. Because of that, the child led Dorothy to his tribe. At this time, Dorothy noticed that the whole tribe seemed to be holding some kind of ceremony. As Dorothy got closer, she discovered that they were holding a ceremony for the woman in red. When the chief learned that Dorothy had killed East, he thought that Dorothy was also a witch. After some discussion, the chief decided to personally take Dorothy to the Emerald City. On the way, Dorothy saw a skeleton of a giant animal and a statue that was hundreds of meters tall. Only then did Dorothy realize that she might have traveled to another world. It turned out to be a magical world with 4 witches in the 4 directions of east, west, south, and north. 20 years ago, a sudden fire broke out. The 4 witches, even working together, could not stop it. The witch of the south even sacrificed herself for it. At that moment, a wizard appeared and summoned a stone giant to stop the disaster. He then became the wizard who ruled the entire land of Oz. He also created many magical things, such as drones with unlimited energy and an extremely impressive projector. Through the footage that the drone brought back, the wizard saw a car that had fallen from a tornado, so he ordered other soldiers to investigate. If there were any survivors, they would die on the spot. Elsewhere, the chief took Dorothy to the border. Just follow this golden road and they could reach the Emerald City. He told Dorothy that if she wanted to return home, she might have to ask the wizard for help. So Dorothy started her journey to the Emerald City. But soon Dorothy saw a wounded man nailed to a board. Out of kindness, she saved the man and helped him bandage his wounds. After talking to him, she learned that the man had lost his memory. He didn't even know who he was, so she named him Lucas. It was getting dark, so the two decided to rest for the night before continuing their journey. But while they were drunk, East, whom Dorothy had accidentally stabbed to death, appeared again. It turned out that East was not dead, but only in a temporary coma. After waking up, East immediately came here. But because of the things Dorothy brought from another world, East did not know what the gun in her hand was. So East harmed herself again. When Dorothy was about to leave, something strange happened. At this time, she still did not know that she had great magical power. The two continued on their way to the Emerald City. Because Lucas had lost his memory, he had to go with Dorothy. But after a while, his wound became infected. If he did not find medicine, his life could be in danger. They asked a farmer and found a doctor named Mombi. After taking the medicine, Lucas's wound also improved. But Dorothy discovered a secret of Mombi. On the second floor of this house, Dorothy saw someone was locked in the room holding out a piece of paper with a help signal. After asking Mombi, Dorothy learned that Mombi had always kept a very sick little boy. Tip had been taken care of by Mombi since he was little. The reason Mombi kept Tip was to protect him. Tip needed to take special medicine every day to stay alive. However, the boy did not want to live like this anymore. Listening to Mombi, Dorothy temporarily understood her intentions. But at night, Dorothy discovered that Mombi had put poison in Lucas's medicine. In a moment of crisis, Dorothy crushed charcoal and mixed it with water for Lucas to drink, temporarily reducing the effect of the poison. Dorothy's anger flared up. It was clear that Mombi was not a good person. While Mombi was sleeping, Dorothy released the imprisoned boy. With Dorothy's help, Tip and his best friend Jack successfully escaped. But when Dorothy and Lucas were about to leave, Mombi woke up. Seeing that Tip had escaped, Mombi went crazy and rushed to strangle Dorothy and tried to force poison into her mouth. Lucas finally intervened in time to save Dorothy. Meanwhile, the two boys ran to a forest. They were dreaming about a free life in the future. But when they both spent the night in this wild forest, something strange happened. Tip suddenly turned into a girl. This sudden change made Tip quite confused. But after thinking, they guessed that this could be the result of the disease that Mombi had mentioned. However, they did not not want to go back. Finally, the two decided to go to the most bustling city nearby, Ever City, to find a cure for Tip. But when they found a doctor there, he said that the medicine Tip had taken was a dark medicine. It changed her nature. In fact, from the beginning to the end, Tip was originally a girl. This news was like a slap in the face to Tip. Tip couldn't accept his current appearance. Jack tried to comfort Tip and promised that whether Tip was a boy or a girl, Jack would always be by Tip's side. Suddenly, Jack stepped forward and kissed Tip. This unexpected action made Tip even angrier. Even though Jack apologized and tried to ease the atmosphere, Tip shouted and said, "What do you know about my life?" In the midst of his emotions, Tip accidentally pushed Jack down. The death of his best friend was the last straw that made Tip officially collapse. Tip came to a bridge and was about to jump off. At this moment, a soldier stopped Tip and said that he could help Tip change his fate. So Tip was taken to the Wizard Academy by the soldier. Tip's hatred of everything caught West's eye. Tip thus became West's favorite student. But what Tip did not expect was that Jack, after falling from a great height, was still alive. A female PhD saved Jack's life when he was in a state of near death. This PhD, living in the city of Ever and possessing advanced technology beyond the times, she used mechanics to create a new body for Jack. Even the heart was artificial. At first, Jack had a lot of difficulty controlling this body, but after a few days of hard training, he gradually got used to this body. When Jack's body had completely recovered, the female PhD took him to the royal family of Ever. The cost of creating Jack's body was paid for by the royal family, and the princess had her eye on Jack, so the princess made him her servant. Elsewhere, on the way to the Emerald City, Dorothy and Lucas happened to come across a circus. They heard from the people in the circus that the magician was looking for Dorothy everywhere. Obviously, it was impossible for Dorothy to get home with the help of a magician, so the two decided to change their plans and head to the castle of East. According to the circus people, East could control the weather. Dorothy was swept away by a tornado. Dorothy hoped that she could use the tornado at the castle to return home. But when the two arrived at the castle, they found that East's guards were still guarding there. When they saw the two, the guards immediately drew their swords and were about to kill them. At this moment, Dorothy stepped forward and persuaded them. The magic gloves that had merged with Dorothy's body suddenly appeared. Seeing the signs of the gloves, the guards thought that Dorothy was the new Eastern witch. Dorothy originally planned to use this method to sneak into the castle and then use the tornado to return, but the guards told Dorothy that she needed to complete the evolution ritual and then use magic to stabilize the current weather. When Dorothy changed into the witch's clothes, she actually looked quite like a witch. Then the guards led them into a mysterious room. In the center of the room was an altar. Above it was a giant tornado. Perhaps if she stepped on this stone altar, she would be able to return to her old world. As the tornado slowly lifted Dorothy up, a second later, the tornado and Dorothy both disappeared. When Dorothy opened her eyes again, she found herself in an icy world. But the strange thing was that this was not her old world either. At that moment, Dorothy saw her mother's name on a piece of clothing. Dorothy was extremely excited and wondered why her mother's clothes were in another world. Before Dorothy could react, she was caught in a tornado and returned to Oz. Determined to know the truth, Dorothy no longer cared about controlling the weather and turned to ask the guards why her mother's clothes appeared here. However, these questions exposed Dorothy's pretense. At this point, the guards finally realized that Dorothy was not their witch, but just an intruder. Dorothy also revealed the truth to this genie. Soon after, the tornado completely lost control and the castle was about to be destroyed. Both of them hurriedly ran away, but the guards in despair decided to stay and follow the Eastern witch to paradise. As they ran out of the castle, the tornado lifted the entire castle into the air. At this point, the doubts in Dorothy's mind increased. Why did the Wizard of Oz want to get rid of her? Why did her mother's things appear here? Only Frank could answer all of these questions. So they set off for the Emerald City once again. As they passed through the Scream Forest, a little girl suddenly rushed out and hugged Lucas, surprising both of them. But it seemed that this little girl actually knew Lucas. They also discovered that the little girl couldn't hear what they were saying. Dorothy pulled the little girl's hair and discovered that there were earplugs in her ears. When Lucas took the earplugs out, the little girl's expression suddenly became extremely tense. It seemed that she was very afraid of the noise outside. Dorothy quickly put the earplugs back in. Seeing the little girl alone in the forest, Dorothy thought that she might be a lost child from a nearby village, so they took her to the village to ask. However, after asking around, no one knew which family she belonged to. Just then, a couple appeared and claimed to be the little girl's parents. They used some candy to trick the little girl into following them. Dorothy was suspicious of their identity, so she offered to go home with them to check. When Dorothy arrived at their house, she discovered that the couple were just swindlers. There was no sign of her presence in the house. They had dragged her out because soldiers sent by Frank had arrived in the village. If they were discovered, they would certainly be arrested. However, However, Dorothy could not leave the little girl alone, so she and Lucas changed their clothes and sneaked back to the couple's house. And what happened next was hard for Dorothy to believe. The girl trembled in fear, and the couple had turned into two stone statues. Dorothy guessed that the little girl was a witch. Dorothy comforted her. When Dorothy tried to pull the little girl's hand out, the statue held her hand so tightly that she could not pull it out. Reluctantly, Dorothy had to use a large hammer to smash the statue to rescue the little girl. As they were about to leave the village with the girl, they were discovered by an officer of the Emerald City Guard. The officer stared at Dorothy's sword and asked where the owner of the sword was. He even slapped her. The little girl stood there, trembling with fear. The officer pulled her back to threaten Dorothy. Cornered, Dorothy pulled out her gun to scare the soldiers. Lucas quickly pulled them both away. When the officer saw Dorothy, he called out John's name, but he didn't realize the danger of the gun in Dorothy's hand. He rushed straight at them. Dorothy had to shoot him in the shoulder to escape chase. They then returned to Scream Forest and discussed what had happened during the day. Lucas's identity became more and more mysterious. However, during the time they spent together, special feelings arose between them. To break the tense atmosphere, Dorothy turned on her headphones and played some soft tunes. The two gradually got closer to each other in the music. The next morning, Lucas heard someone approaching them, so they decided to separate and run away and meet again at another location. But as soon as they separated, Lucas met the officer from the day before. Dorothy was shot by a dart. When she woke up, she was in the territory of the Western Wizard, West. West questioned Dorothy about what kind of magic you used to kill my sister. Dorothy immediately told West to search her backpack. Dorothy planned to use the same method to get rid of West, but West was clearly much smarter. Looking at Dorothy's frightened expression, West understood that the gun should be pointed at someone else, not at himself. West did not hesitate to pull the trigger, but at that moment, the gun did not fire a single bullet. It turned out that the last time Dorothy used the gun, she accidentally removed the cartridge. That unintentional action saved Dorothy's life. Feeling deceived, West decided to punish Dorothy so that she would live a life of worthlessness. West used her ultimate magic on Dorothy and controlled Dorothy like a puppet. Although Dorothy did not want it, West still forced Dorothy to relax her muscles in the air. The more pain Dorothy felt, the more excited the Western Witch became. Tip, standing next to her, recognized Dorothy early, but because Tip was now in the form of a girl, Dorothy did not recognize. Finally, West used magic to throw Dorothy hard to the ground. Only then did the magic glove hidden in Dorothy's body appear. Seeing this, West immediately wanted to step forward to take it off, but she was repelled by the energy from the glove. Therefore, West temporarily stopped torturing Dorothy. During this short period of time, Tip also secretly took out the key to the secret underground exit and helped Dorothy escape. However, Dorothy did not leave the Emerald City, but put on a mask and took advantage of the darkness to sneak into the wizard's castle. Seeing the decorations in the castle, she was amazed. Dorothy even heard popular songs from her world. At this moment, Dorothy realized that the magician could also be a time traveler like her. When Dorothy mentioned her mother's name, the magician immediately said her mother's name correctly. It turned out that the magician's real name was Frank. He used to work with Dorothy's mother in a research company, but he was just a maintenance worker, while Dorothy's mother was a PhD of science. During their research on tornadoes, they discovered that tornadoes could travel to other worlds. Frank saw this opportunity and deliberately interfered with the tornado release device in the laboratory. The tornado swept them to Oz. When he arrived in this world, Frank realized that their technology was no different from magic to this place. The other two went to the Witch of the East and were promised to help them return, but Frank did not want to return. Instead, he used despicable tricks to become the powerful Wizard of Oz. From then on, he ordered anyone caught in the tornado to be killed. Knowing that Frank used to know her mother, Dorothy asked him to take her back. However, Frank asked Dorothy to help him kill the other two witches, because he knew that Dorothy had recently used a gun to kill East. Dorothy did not want to hurt anyone just to get home, so Frank offered her another deal. As long as she gave him the gun, he would release Lucas and the witch Anna. At the same time, he promised to bring her back later. Dorothy agreed to this deal. The next day, Dorothy, Lucas and Anna left the Emerald City. However, they faced another problem. Now they knew Anna was a witch, but should they take her to the Witch of the North? While Dorothy and Lucas were discussing, a pack of gray wolves suddenly rushed out of the forest. Anna was wearing earplugs, so she was unaware of the approaching danger. In the emergency, Dorothy once again summoned her magic gloves to release her energy and chase the wolves away. To avoid a similar situation, Dorothy calmed Anna down and gradually removed her earplugs. Under Dorothy's guidance, Anna gradually adapted to the sounds of the outside world. Over time, Anna also became dependent on Dorothy. In the morning, Dorothy told Lucas about her intentions. She would convince the Witch of the North not to fight Frank so that Anna would not have to participate in this battle, and she could also return home come with peace of mind. The next day they arrived at the castle of the Witch of the North, Glinda. But when Dorothy met Glinda, she saw a shocking scene. Glinda stepped forward and kissed Lucas. This kiss made Lucas's memories return completely. It turned out that Lucas was Glinda's husband. During a mission, Lucas was ambushed by Frank's men and activated the curse that Glinda had placed on him. Now, Lucas returned to Glinda to confront Frank with her. While Dorothy was temporarily imprisoned, Anna was taken to the Witch Academy to begin her studies. There were many people like Anna, but all of them had no expression. It seemed that all their emotions had been taken away. Even when Anna saw Lucas and tried to greet him, but she was disappointed by his indifferent attitude. The other little witches deliberately teased Anna. They used magic to move her bowl. Anna immediately turned her bowl into stone, but only received laughter from everyone. At dinner time, the same thing happened again. This time, Anna was really angry. She reacted by using her ability to pull the bowl back. Looking back at everyone's disdainful expressions, Anna used magic to pull all their bowls in front of her. Strangely, instead of being angry, they applauded Anna. It turned out that the witches here would later become warriors against powerful witches. They had to learn how to be strong and weak and needed to have the instinct to crush everything. But during this almost sick training process, many girls could not stand the pressure and were eventually imprisoned and went crazy. Witnessing the fate of these girls, Dorothy was strongly agitated and the magic in her body also appeared. Dorothy immediately rushed into Glinda's room. With just a wave of Dorothy's hand, the blanket wrapped tightly around Glinda, then strangled her and hung her in the air. At this time, Lucas also ran over. However, Dorothy seemed to have lost control at this moment. No matter how Lucas tried to persuade Dorothy, it was all in vain. It was only when Lucas yelled at Dorothy that she stopped. Seeing the man she loved say such words made her completely disappointed. Afterwards, Dorothy went to Anna's room and said she wanted to take her away from here, but Anna was not moved at all. It turned out that during the past few days of training, Anna had completely changed. Seeing the situation like this, Dorothy could only leave sadly. Dorothy rode her white horse back to the house where they used to live together. At that moment, Lucas suddenly appeared from behind. He was ordered by Glinda to eliminate Dorothy. Although he did not have the heart to do it, for many unexpected reasons, he was forced to do so. When Lucas was about to kill Dorothy in tears, Dorothy's little dog pounced on Lucas and bit him, giving her the chance to escape. But Lucas was an experienced warrior, so he quickly chased Dorothy again. However, at this moment, Lucas kept telling Dorothy to kill him. It was as if Lucas had two different personalities in his body. Dorothy pulled out the dagger from her waist and stabbed Lucas. Then, Dorothy stabbed Lucas into a wooden post, just like when they first met. A few days later, Dorothy returned to the tribe where she had landed. Here, Dorothy finally understood the truth about the witches ruling Oz. It turned out that the giants were not controlled by the witches, but by the wish of the chief's wife. The witch had used their entire tribe to threaten them, so they were forced to help the witch hide the truth. In Dorothy's eyes, the witch and Glinda were not good people. In the end, the people who suffered in this war were still the civilians and innocent children. So Dorothy went to the imprisoned chief's wife and asked her to give the curse back to Dorothy. Dorothy promised to return the witch to her original world and bring peace to Oz. Hearing Dorothy's words, the chief's wife was extremely happy because this was also the ending they wanted the most, so she would have no regrets even if she died. On the other side, Frank was also preparing for a big battle. He invited the Princess of Ever City to Emerald City to discuss cooperation. Ever City had a very developed manufacturing industry. As long as they produced these guns and bullets, they would no longer be afraid of immortal beasts or witches. The princess had also witnessed the power of the weapons with her own eyes, so she agreed to this cooperation. However, there were some interesting things that happened on this trip to Emerald City. Jack, who had turned into an Iron Man, he had always been the princess's servant, but her arrogance also made him feel uncomfortable. In fact, the princess also really wanted a soulmate. One day, Jack secretly followed the princess to attend the Lantern Festival, but they encountered a group of thugs blocking their way. His act of protecting her without regard for his life made the princess start to have feelings for him. At the same time, Jack accidentally met Tip, his old best friend. Tip also couldn't believe that Jack was still alive. Although Tip sincerely apologized, Jack couldn't forgive her and said that they couldn't go back to the way they were. Tip tried to tell Jack that she had just realized that she really loved him, but Jack said that what did Tip say now make sense? Hearing Tip's words, Jack became even angrier. At this time, the princess realized the abnormality between the two. The princess quickly guessed that Tip was the one who had attacked Jack. However, he still did not mention the change in his body. Seeing that, the princess ordered Jack to take off his shirt to show Tip what was inside his body. Jack reluctantly did as he was told. Witnessing that terrifying scene, Tip finally realized that she had completely lost this friend. But from Jack's eyes, it could be seen that he still cared about Tip very much. On the way back, Jack even argued with Princess about this. In a fit of anger, the princess chased him off the carriage. But as soon as he got off the carriage, he fell right into a ditch next to it. At first, Jack did not pay attention and continued walking. But at night, he discovered that his legs had become extremely stiff until he could no longer move. When he pulled up his pants, he discovered that his body had rusted because of the water. He shouted for help, but there was not a single person in the forest. Jack stood there until nightfall. When Jack was almost in despair, the princess riding a white horse found him. She brought lubricant and poured it on his mechanical limbs. After applying the lubricant all over his body, Jack's body returned to normal. Returning to Evercity, Jack and the princess also opened their hearts and truly came together, but their happy life did not last long. The blacksmith in Evercity produced a large number of guns based on Dorothy's gun. The princess knew Frank's cunning very well, so on the day of the exchange, she pointed the gun barrel at Frank and demanded that he bring 10 barrels of gold. This completely angered him. He arranged for several assassins to hide in the barrels of gold. In the middle of the night, when the kingdom's guards were negligent, the assassins broke into the princess's room and kidnapped her. The soldiers of Evercity did not dare to act rashly. At this time, Jack wanted to attack Frank from behind, but as soon as he squeezed the brush, Frank discovered the bullet hit the princess. The person he loved died right in front of him, making Jack extremely miserable. He hugged the princess's body and went to PhD Jane, hoping that she could save the princess like she had saved him. But PhD Jane said that the princess was not dead. The next scene made Jack extremely feverish. PhD Jane used a knife to cut Princess's face. It turned out that Princess had been completely transformed into a robot. It turned out that 20 years ago, the city of Ever was attacked by immortal creatures, and the princess had died at that time. Jane tried to save the princess's broken body and regenerate other parts. The princess often wore a mask to hide her face that never aged. The original reason the city of Ever collapsed was also due to Frank's cruelty. Knowing the truth, Jack decided to take advantage of his iron armor. He picked up the axe and prepared to kill Frank. With the iron armor, Jack actually rushed into Frank's camp alone. When Jack was about to kill Frank with a kite, Frank told Dr. Jane that her daughter was in Oz. This saved his life. It turned out that PhD Jane was Dorothy's mother. At the same time, Dorothy used the curse she got from the native tribe to summon the stone giant and went to the battlefield. When Jane saw Dorothy in front of her, she was about to take her daughter back, but suddenly, the sky suddenly appeared countless insects flying towards the battlefield. All the soldiers and Dorothy were trapped in them. At this time, Dorothy's magic glove appeared. In a flash, all the surrounding insects were frozen. Glinda stepped out from the middle of the insects. Dorothy still tried to convince Glinda to take the witches back to the north and not to start a war, but Glinda showed contempt. Glinda called Anna to her side and thanked Dorothy for protecting Anna. Anna's specialness made Glinda no longer afraid of the stone giant. When Glinda gave the order, Anna began to cast her magic. From afar, the stone giant was completely destroyed. Its body shattered into pieces. Seeing this scene, Dorothy recited the spell again and controlled the stone giant of the Emerald City to stab the center of the witch's temple with a spear. Under the temple was the source of the witch's power. Their power was immediately reduced many times. The surrounding insects also turned back into dust. But at that moment, Frank shot Anna, causing the stone giant to fall, and dust covered the entire battlefield. War was about to break out, and Frank's soldiers used guns to take down each witch one by one. Anna's sacrifice also completely angered Dorothy. Dorothy's magic glove emitted an unprecedented light. With just a wave of her hand, all the soldiers around were blown away. Dorothy took a step towards Frank, but he still denied it and said that he was saving Oz. Just as Dorothy was about to squeeze Frank's gun, the witches that had been piled up around suddenly came to life. They all walked to Glinda's side and called her was their master. It turned out that these guns could not kill witches at all. Only witches could kill witches. At this point, Frank had completely failed. Dorothy led Frank to the witch's castle and asked him to use the vortex with her to return to the old world. But even though he had failed, Frank still did not want to go back. To prevent Dorothy from taking him back, Frank said that Dorothy's mother was still in Oz. But Dorothy no longer believed anything he said. In the end, Frank even intended to destroy the tornado machine. At this time, Dr. Jean suddenly opened fire and fired a warning shot at him. Dorothy grabbed the old man and furiously cursed him for being so stubborn. In her extreme anger, Dorothy did not even recognize her mother approaching her. At this time, Dr. Jean revealed her identity and directly mentioned the birthmark on her hand. Seeing the mother she missed day and night, Dorothy was extremely moved. Dorothy had many questions to ask, but Jean interrupted. It turned out that this machine was originally invented by Jean. In the past, Jean wanted to return, but the machine was taken by Frank. Jean also said that she would return home with Dorothy. But when Dorothy stepped inside, her mother closed the machine door. Jean did not explain, but only said that all this was to protect Dorothy. When the tornado gradually disappeared, Dorothy also disappeared. When Dorothy woke up, she had returned to the the old world. But it wasn't over yet. After Frank's defeat, Oz was still in trouble. Time went back to the day before, when Glinda and Frank were preparing to fight. West found Tip holding a dagger decorated with emeralds. West asked Tip where the dagger came from. When he learned that Tip had carried it since she was a child, West guessed her identity. This was an item that the previous King of Oz had left for his daughter. Based on Tip's age, West guessed that Tip was likely the princess. Tip's adoptive mother had turned her into a boy just to protect her. Unexpectedly, accepting a student led to this surprising discovery. Before West could react, she hugged Tip and flew into the air together. When they landed, they were both in the basement of the sanctuary, where all the magic of dead witches was stored. West asks Tip to drink the magic potion that her sister East left behind. Thanks to that, Tip can restore the kingdom of Oz that belongs to her. After drinking the magic potion, Tip's body begins to convulse. In Tip's mind, an image from her childhood appears. As a child, she witnessed a man wearing a lion mask harming her parents. When Tip wakes up, she possesses the power of the Supreme Witch. Tip immediately transforms herself into a boy. Then, they rescue the witches who were imprisoned by Frank. West gathers everyone and asks them to support Tip as emperor, reclaim the Emerald City, and restore the kingdom of Oz. However, the other witches suspect that West wants to rule for himself because Tip is a boy. Immediately, all the witches cast magic to prepare to execute West on the spot. Finally, Tip comes out and is no longer confused about gender. He transformed back into a princess and unleashed a powerful magical power that transmitted the image of her parents being assassinated to everyone present. Finally, everyone recognized Tip's identity as a princess. Then they headed towards the Emerald City. Since Frank had led the army to Glinda's battlefield, the magical witches easily broke down the city gate. The lion-headed officer also realized that the situation was no longer on his side, so he knelt before Tip. However, Tip did not kill him immediately, but immediately used magic to erase all of Iman's family's memories of him. Even though the family was standing before them, they could not recognize their own child. This was the cruelest punishment for Iman. He was then banished and never allowed to enter the Emerald City again. At the same time, Glinda led the witches to the Emerald City. What Glinda didn't expect was that West had found the daughter of the former king, but that was the truth, and Glinda couldn't change it. However, they were all wrong. What they should really fear was the immortal beast. It turned out that in the dark prison, a man was stripped free from his bonds. He shakily took a piece of human skin from a tree branch. Then he used a knife to cut it into pieces and wore it like clothes. Then his body began to change, growing a pair of giant wings. The legendary immortal beast had reappeared in Oz. 2 months passed and Dorothy returned to the real world, still confused about that strange experience. She didn't know if Oz was real or just a dream, until one day, Dorothy suddenly saw Lucas appear before her. At this point, she was sure that her trip through the world was real. Lucas came to take Dorothy back this time. Once again, Dorothy saved Oz and rescued her mother. That's the end of the video. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.